Hi everyone, and welcome to another marvelous video. In today's video, we will be discussing the 50-foot-long woman who was showcased in the independently made American science fiction horror film titled Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Well, it was not just one movie, but two more, of which one was a remake while the other was loosely adapted to the concept. The stories revolve around troubled ladies who, due to strange reasons, had grown up humongous in size. So without any further delay, let's begin exploring the anatomical changes of the three women in the different movies. Let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I can't breathe!
Who is the 50-foot woman? There were three women who, owing to some unfathomable scientific or alien activity, obtained gigantic sizes. 1958's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which Nathan H. Jurin directed, showcased a married woman called Nancy Fowler Archer turning into a giantess. Nancy, played by Allison Hayes, was shown to be a wealthy but troubled woman, frequently succumbing to emotional instability and alcoholism. In 1993, director Christopher Guest remade Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, with actress Daryl Hannah playing the role of Nancy Archer. Although the plot remained loyal to its 1958 counterpart, slight deviations existed. The film begins with a tour group at a memorial museum, where Dr. Loeb shows them the true story of Nancy Archer. Nancy had inherited enormous wealth from her late mother, with her father seeking to acquire her entire estate for himself. Nancy's husband was unfaithful to her and spent most of his time with the beautiful mistress, Honey Parker. Even he had plans to steal Nancy's wealth. All of this made Nancy get depressed, and she frequently visited her psychiatrist, Dr. Cushing. She had made several attempts to confront her husband and her father, but owing to her inability to control her anger, she could never prove her point, and the two of them took advantage of it. Directed by Kevin O'Neill and produced by Roger Corman, in 2012, there was yet another version of Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. It was the Attack of the 50-Foot Cheerleader. Along with the name, there were several changes in the plot. Unlike the previous two movies, the film's main antagonist was not a woman of low self-esteem and a low emotional quotient. In this film, it was Cassie Stratford, a plain science nerd who was often bullied and treated as an outcast in college. Cassie's mother was the captain of the cheer squad at Iron Coast University and the sorority president, Zeta Mu, for which Cassie was also forced to join. However, after being rejected by the current cheerleader squad captain and the president of Zeta Mu, she began working at the university's biolab. She later made a friend there, and his name was Kyle. How did she turn into a giantess? In 1958's movie, one night while driving through an American desert in California, Nancy Archer encountered a glowing alien sphere before her. Taking a stop, she got out of her car to inquire and found a huge creature, which soon turned to reach for her. Nancy barely managed to escape, but no one believed her when she arrived back in town and narrated the incident. No matter how much she tried to convince herself, her past reputation, which included her recent stay at a mental institution, made everyone question her sanity. Her husband, Harry Archer, was more into her wealth and maintained a relationship with the town floozy Honey Parker. All he wanted for was Nancy to do something crazy, which would evidently send her back to the asylum, leaving her wealth with him. When Nancy urged Harry to go to the desert with her, he agreed on the condition that if Nancy's claims were false, she would have to return to the sanatorium. However, when the two of them arrived at the spot, the alien was present. It was a gigantic male human, and Harry, after relentlessly firing at the alien, fled, leaving Nancy behind. Later, Nancy was found on the roof of her pool house and taken care of by her family physician, Dr. Cushing. Believing her to be exposed to an immense amount of radiation, the doctor suggested injecting Nancy with a lethal dose of sedatives. However, when they entered the room, Nancy had grown to a giant size. In the second film, Nancy also had a similar encounter with an alien spaceship. As the plot progressed, Nancy encountered a UFO one night while driving through the middle of the desert and later convinced Harry to come with her. When the two of them found the UFO, it emitted a ray of light and wrapped Nancy. Harry escaped, and after returning to the town, he didn't mention the incident to anyone, believing it to be an opportunity to get rid of her. Later, a delirious Nancy was found at the top of her salon and brought back home. A brief argument broke out between Harry and Nancy's father after the latter accused Harry of leaving Nancy in the desert. Nancy could not bear them anymore, and they suddenly began reacting to her physique. Soon her body ripped off her clothes, and she grew gigantic in size. In Attack of the 50-Foot Cheerleader, there was no alien encounter. Our protagonist protagonist, Cassie, spent most of her time in the lab, and at some point, she and her friend Kyle started working on a drug that turned things beautiful. One night, Cassie stole the drug and injected it into herself. Initially, the medicine showed promising results, making Cassie pretty. She was soon accepted into the cheerleading squad, after which the side effects of the drug began to kick in. It caused Cassie to grow in size, and she was turned into a giant. How much Rampage can the Giantess cause? There has not been any exact measure of how catastrophic they could be, but the rampage caused by them was quite worrisome. In the first film, when Nancy grew gigantic, Dr. Cushing managed to contain her after applying high doses of morphine, but she later escaped, and the film continued with her rampage. Her huge size caused enormous damage to the town, and Nancy wanted to take revenge on her unfaithful husband. In the film's climax, Nancy could be seen with Harry in her palm, with the sheriff and the rest searching for ways to take her down. Finally, the sheriff fired his shotgun at her, which caused a nearby power line transformer to explode, killing both Nancy and Harry. In the 1993 film, Nancy's growth in size helps her boost her self-esteem and confidence, while Harry believes that intense emotional stress might overload her heart and cause her death. He revealed his current affair, along with all the other flings that he carried out while being married to her. The insult and shock caused Nancy to lose her senses and crash into a nearby stable. Believing her to be dead, Harry began celebrating, starting with giving Nancy's diamond necklace to his mistress. However, Nancy was not dead, and after getting back to her senses, she began searching for Harry for revenge. She found Harry, but unlike 1958's story, she did not die, but, together with Harry, was taken by the UFO that had once captured her. In the case of Attack of the 50-Foot Cheerleader, there was a catfight between two giantesses, and it caused intense damage to the college stadium. After Cassie turned into a giantess, her arch-nemesis, Brittany, made her way to the biolab after learning about Cassie and Kyle's drug. Seducing Kylie, she managed to inject herself with the same drug, but in higher proportions. Soon, Brittany also transformed herself into a giantess and made her way to the stadium. Brittany and Cassie engaged in a fight, causing massive collateral damage. However, unlike the previous films, the rampage was restricted to the college premises and did not affect a city or a town. Later, when Kylie arrived with the antidote, Cassie injected Brittany with large quantities. Later, Kyle injected Cassie with the same, and she was brought back to her original size. Brittany shrank into a dwarf. Can she reproduce? In all three movies, the 50-foot woman was not shown to have any offspring. She was married and most likely could give birth to children. However, the question arises as to whether she could do the same thing after mutating into a giant. Nancy's giantism was either owing to mutation or she was experimented with, and it brings up the question of whether, after all of this, she could still reproduce. Cassie, on the other hand, was reverted back to her normal state, and she should not be having any issues with giving birth normally.
I'm not sure, but I think your antidote may be working. Check out these GH levels. Okay.
How much food does she consume? It can be inferred that a giant would eat twice as much as a normal human being. She had grown gigantic, which would cause her to lose massive amounts of energy when performing basic functions like walking or talking. While on a date with her unfaithful husband, she was shown to be drinking wine from a barrel. It might have been shown to justify how a giant would require every object around to be compatible with its size. But scientifically, the giant woman should be needing an enormous amount of food to survive. Does she get superpowers after turning into a giant woman? After growing into a giant, she might not be able to shoot lasers from her eyes, but she does have two obvious superpowers owing to her enormous size.
Nancy?
Number 1. Gigantic size. As the name of the film suggests, the antagonist of the film eventually achieved a height of 50 feet. For the reasons mentioned, the women's transformations were not reversible, except for Cassie. The other two women, who were transformed after an unknown alien interaction, did not revert to their original size or lives. Talking about her size, 50 feet is quite huge compared to even the tallest human. We can see in the two movies that when Nancy went in search of Harry, her mere strolling caused a rampage in the town. In the second movie, Nancy had been shot down by a helicopter, which again emphasizes how massive she had grown. The causes were different in each of the movies. In the 1958 movie, doctors claim Nancy had been exposed to an enormous amount of alien radiation. It implies that it was a case of rapid mutation in Nancy's body. 1993's Nancy's cause for Transformers remained unclear throughout the movie. However, at the end of the film, after Harry and Nancy are taken into the alien spaceship, the former is shown to be experimented upon by two other giantesses. It can be inferred that Nancy was experimented upon by the aliens, who transformed her into a giant. Meanwhile, the cause of Cassie's transformation was clearly mentioned to be a synthesized drug, and it could be reverted back. Number 2. Superhuman strength. With their enormous size, Nancy and Cassie were also granted superhuman strength. Breaking buildings and towers was no longer a big task for these three gigantic women when Nancy, from both 1958 and 1993's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, went in search of her husband. Her overwhelming strength scared every townsperson. She tore off the rooftops of several buildings and a local bar. Electric lines across the town were damaged, causing widespread power cuts. Was she immortal? The second movie showcased the 50-foot woman surviving a bullet shot, which raised the question of whether she was immortal. However, the first film clearly showcased her dying, which concluded that with her superhuman size and strength, she was not immortal. The final movie had no such window to test her mortality, leaving us with unclear ideas about her immortality. Marvelous verdict! So, we have finally come to the end of the video, and we hope you have liked our content. The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman might seem conceptually weak in terms of a horror film, but it was smartly written, bringing about a feminist take on the concept. With this, we will be ending today's video, and feel free to add your views in the comment section. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next marvelous video.